Good day and welcome to another episode of the Inside Out Perspective. Up until now in this little mini-series, we've had a look at the effects of the migration of the traditional Bantu tribes from Africa into Southern Africa and the same type of migration of Islam into Southern Africa up until the 1960s. Today I want to have a look at how the supposedly defeat of ISIS in Iran and Iraq has just simply migrated to Central Africa, and how they're utilizing those same patterns and same diversity within the Ummah of Islam and create their new caliph, which they're looking for. Please note, information I'm using is available on media platforms, and I'm just simply looking at it from the inside out perspective and how this is going to affect South Africa. Hi, I'm Raymond Douglas and welcome to my man cave. The inside out perspective takes a look at life's challenges and its effects and asks one simple question: what race are you running? Opponents. Now we can see this, that ISIS and Boko Haram, or the Islamic extremists, have taken control of that central strip of North Africa. And the problem with that is you link that together with already the extreme groups operating in Somalia. Although they don't make alliance with ISIS, we're having a look here at different components of the military wing of Islam establishing their faith and seeking their caliph. Now let's have a look at the definition of the caliph. And that is simply stated as follows: a caliph is an Islamic state under the leadership of an Islamic steward with the title of caliph, a person considered a political and religious successor of the Islamic prophet Muhammad, a leader of the entire Muslim community. Now, isn't that what the Sunni Muslims in the south of Mozambique are claiming? That they have the legal and spiritual right to Mozambique? And this is what ISIS and Boko Haram are seeking in the greater African communities. And look at that infiltration of it. If we have a look at the ISIS involvement in Somalia, they're already penetrating into Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. And that's hectic, because look at that. Isn't that a mirror of the original path of Islam into Africa? And now we're having these extreme groups coming down into Africa and operating in northern Mozambique in the same manner in which they're doing in North Africa. Another thing that needs to be highlighted here is the clandestine way of the way things are operated, because from a political viewpoint, Al-Shabaab operating in northern Mozambique is claimed not to have an affiliate with Somalia, Al-Shabaab. But listen to what people on the ground actually have to say about this.
Before they were like us, they prayed like us. Then as soon as they started listening to those tapes from Somalia, they began to call themselves Al-Shabaab.
Authorities said there was no proof of a link to Somalia's Al-Shabaab militants or any other known jihadist group. But it was found that several of the young attackers had regularly visited Tanzania, Sudan, or Somalia, where they were allegedly radicalized.
Initially, we tried to warn the authorities, but we couldn't stop them.
Many young people in this poverty-stricken region have been radicalized by Islamist extremists who ban their followers from voting or sending their children to school and encourage them to fight the state.
Now, to put this in context of the implication of how this is going to affect our lives in Southern Africa, I wanted to have a look at two reports from hotspots.
You could see the sort of hurriedness that it had been evacuated. Signs are a family probably stayed here because there are small toys left behind. And in this suitcase we see a little bit of a part of a book which is in French, a woman's glove, a watch, Calvin Klein watch, what appears to be part of a diary in which they say that it doesn't matter what the amputations are, the injuries, the torture and imprisonment, it's all worth it for Allah. And there's a child's drawing here which shows the Islamic flag and a plane dropping bombs on houses. And it just gave you a glimpse into what life must have been like for these people who'd suddenly had to leave.
Notice here from that letter and that suitcase and that picture of that child that you get the impression, or you get the feeling that the person who wrote that has absolutely, totally no control over what is happening. They just have to follow suit of what the greater Ummah is doing, or what the greater Islamic community is doing. And this is played out in the next insert. I find this extremely emotional and troublesome. But please watch it.
Sometimes where there's been big conflict, some of the most interesting stories come from just outside the battlefield. We were told that they had set up a sort of rehabilitation centre specifically for children who had been identified by the Islamic State as cubs of the caliphate. These were the children that they wanted to train and brainwash into being their soldiers of the future. All the children had been found in various compromising positions. Some had been found with suicide vests on, some had been found fighting, and others were the offspring of caliphate leaders. So they were all identified as very, very vulnerable children.
They're learning about the solar system, but not long before they had weapons.
All these children had a very, very small world, which was all around IS. Now they were learning about the huge big world and the whole universe.
There was a kind of lack of childlike spark in quite a few of the children, we thought, and they were clearly heavily traumatized by whatever they had experienced.
I can't imagine the stress a child would be under, especially if they were taken to this area by someone they trusted, like a parent. There was a very little French-speaking boy who was 9 when he was taken to Syria by his father. This little boy stood out quite a lot because he seemed very European. He'd somehow managed to survive, but he had this big black cloud over him.
One of the boys spoke very calmly about how his siblings had just been killed.
He sort of said in a very way, "Oh yeah, my 2 brothers got killed in a bombing."
Quand on était dans la maison, ils ont frappé l'avion et ils sont morts, moi j'ai rien.
And he just mentioned it as something that had happened.
He didn't know really what had happened to his father and didn't seem to want to talk about his father, but he talked a lot about his mother, who had been left behind and who he'd been taken away from, and who was still in Paris.
Première chose, je veux rester avec ma mère et je parle de tout ce qui s'est passé et tout. Et ça, je sais pas, ici, ils le font.
He'd obviously spent some time hand-making gifts.
Ça, c'est du parfum.
He had a selection of them, little bag, bracelets, little ties.
Ça, c'est la même chose.
And he'd written this letter to his mum with a great big heart on the front, telling her how much he loved her.
Young boy reaching out to his mum thousands of miles away.
He wanted us to try and find her in Paris and hand it over to her.
We took them from him with the hope that we would try and get them to his mum in Paris.
I thought, the last thing I do, kind of make sure I find that mother. If he's missing her this much, she must definitely be missing him. I thought before we even saw his mother, she's going to be quite emotional.
Pierre, not his real name, was taken to Raqqa by his father with his 2 older brothers.
She was furious at her ex-husband. She thought he was just taking them away for a couple of days. They disappeared for 4 years. She didn't know exactly where he was, and watching pictures of him,
absorbing every frame that was being shown to her. There's that little boy who's a whole world away. She's desperate to get him back.
she was very emotional. She knows that her son has made this for her. And then when she got to the letter, I mean, just on the outside of it is emotional enough because there's a great big heart with an arrow through it. Written by her son, who she hasn't been able to hold for 4 years. And she was too emotional to read it. So she asked Sophie, our producer, to read it out for her.
Comment ça va? Comment vous êtes? Comment est ma sœur? Maman, je vous aime beaucoup et je savais jamais vous oublier. Et Inch'Allah,
I can't imagine what she's feeling.
Wow. I just have a look at that again and my heart breaks for that child. Here we got a 13-year-old young boy who just simply desires the love of his mother. And what has he done? He's taken by his father into the ISIS scenario and been made a soldier at the age of 9. Watching his 2 brothers being killed, and no doubt he hasn't been arrested because he's an innocent bystander. He's in that group because he was effectively involved in promoting the ISIS faith. I want to put this in context, in context of the westernization thinking of this. And a perfect example was with a good friend of mine a couple of weeks ago when I was trying to tell him what was happening around us and how potentially this can influence us. He was totally irate, saying, no, it will never happen. No, you don't have sufficient faith. But have a look at this. These Islamic extremists are coming in under the banner of their God, fighting and shouting, Allah Akbar, we're doing it in the name of Allah. And they standing at your front door with a pang in their hand, and they've chopped off your one son's head and saying to you, follow Islam, and we're taking your daughter and your other son and putting them into the Islamic community as a sex slave or ISIS soldier. And the question is, where is your faith at that point in time? The greater question is, are you going to allow it to go to that extreme? And now's the time, ladies and gentlemen, especially for us complacent Westerners who do not think Islam is a threat. Take heed to what is being represented here. Do the homework and then ask yourself the question, what race are you running?